going to hand you over straight away to Kim, who's presented this morning.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Yeah, so my name is Kim Baden-Christensen. I am the CEO of a company called Brain Plus, and today we'll be talking a bit about the future of neurogaming. I will be giving you some of my perspectives, but it will also be a mixed format where I'll want to involve you guys in a bit of these discussions, and I'll be presenting some of the stuff we're working with because it ties into a lot of directly into this whole discussion about the possibilities we have with neurogaming, the need there is for neurogaming and such. Brain Plus is a company that takes insights from science, from neuroscience, from cognitive psychology, and from other sciences, and try to transform that into effective products for training your brain, for rehabilitating your brain, etc. But I want to start with telling you a little bit of a story that changed my personal perspective on the possibilities of neurogaming. That happened a little more than a year ago when we were working with our first product. And I received an email from a woman who was a chronic pain patient. She was also suffering from PTSD-like stress reactions. And she had somehow heard of Brain Plus, our first product, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, what that actually is. But this woman was suffering on a daily basis. She couldn't work. She had attention problems. She couldn't hold a straight train of thoughts. So this was basically disabling her to function normally in her everyday life. And so she started using the product, and she said that after a couple of weeks, she felt improvements in her ability to hold her train of thoughts and hold her attention for a sustained period of time. But that wasn't really the most interesting part of her email. The most interesting part was related to her PTSD attacks that she sometimes got. And when you get that type of stress reaction, she said, your entire mind gets overwhelmed and you become incapable of functioning. And she said that actually the only way she could usually get out of that was with the help of a therapist. But then she'd made this attempt to do it differently. She'd gone into a room, turned off the lights, lit one candle, and she started using the Brain Plus product for actually distracting her own brain. And that seemed to work for her. That actually calmed her down. And whether that's because it was a game, and the Brain Plus is about games, as you'll see, whether that's because games are good at distracting people and thus have an application in helping you get out of a stressful situation where your mind is overwhelmed, that may be the reason. It might be the placebo effect that she actually believed that this worked. We don't really know. What it told me was that games can be used for much more than we actually think for positive purposes. So that's also kind of the topic of this workshop, is what can we really achieve with games related to the brain, behavior, etc. So let's start with the first question for the audience. And I'd like to ask you, the way we use technology changes our brains. How many of you agree with this or believe this to be true? Please raise your hand so we can see. Yeah. So a lot of you do, in fact the majority, but there are also some skeptics. How many of you are skeptical of this statement? Okay, not really that many skeptics. I would like you to just take 1 minute to turn to a person next to you and discuss what do you think are actually some of the technologies in terms of digital technologies that we use today that are changing our brains the most. So give you 1 minute to do that. So please turn to somebody on the row behind you, in front of you, next to you.
I work with
of people volunteer their view for the rest of the audience? Just let's just hear one or two. Yes?
So, like I said, in regards to technology, if we compare today's day to like, let's say 30 years ago, you know, technology wasn't as accessible. So, you know, I'll give you an example. So today, if you was at home and you've got like an assignment to do, or you're using the internet for something, and your internet goes down, you think you can't function. You're like, oh my god, the internet's gone down. What am I going to do? 30 years ago, they didn't have the internet. So technology changed the way we think because we rely on technology so much. And you know, when we don't have it, we can't function sometimes. So that's how it changed the way we think in our brains.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are many more ways than that technology is changing us. Actually, my own fascination with the brain is what led me to found Brain Plus, and I was actually here in London reading around brain plasticity. And some of you may know this book. It's called The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Deutsch. A fascinating book that speaks about some of the revolutionary change in paradigm that there has been within science in terms of our belief that the brain can actually change dramatically throughout our whole life, down on the cellular level. You can grow the size of the actual neurons, you can grow new connections, etc. And what actually prompts that types of changes, sometimes we didn't believe that a lot of this we didn't believe was possible before. And also how you can use technology to provoke or facilitate these types of plastic changes. That was basically what gave me the motivation to go into this whole area of using technology for training the brain and improving the brain. So what I want to, and that was basically the idea, and we decided to go deeper into the topic and found Brain Plus. What I want to talk about now is about the need that we see out there from my perspective, and I'll open that up later on in the presentation. But some of the needs I see out there in terms of how we can use digital brain training, which is my area of expertise, to actually help people out there. So these are some of the clinical applications. We're very focused on the users. Who will this be of benefit to? We're a commercial company. We're taking science and we're putting it into real life application. So we're very focused on the users. So there are depression patients or sufferers of depression. These people have a problem with motivation. They have a problem with their affective state. They have a problem with their emotions. They need some serious help to get out of that condition. There are people who suffer from stress. It's one of the biggest everyday diseases in our world today. And you have people suffering from brain injury. As we'll see, there are millions on a global scale every year. And all these people, they need help and they lack tools. And that's why a lot of the people in this room can help these people with the technologies, with the digital technologies. We've worked mainly in Denmark as our base, and there we've been contacted actually by a lot of the rehabilitation centers working with people with all these kinds of conditions. And what they tell us is that they are lacking tools today. And that's where, again, an audience like this can play a role in providing those tools. They really want to do cognitive rehabilitation, cognitive training. They're lacking the resources and they're lacking the tools. So there's a great need out there, and I'm sure that you guys have experienced that as well here in UK. But there's also regular people who are not having any clinical disabilities, healthy people who want to do something about their personal development, their brain, their capacity, etc. And there we see some needs in terms of people who want to actually achieve something in life, who want to take their capacity, their attention, their memory to even higher levels than they are today. We see people who are focused on health. Just general health and well-being are really, really big concerns these days for people. So these are also areas where you can go and help these people. Then you have parents. This is basically perhaps one of the most emotional topics for a lot of people. If you have a child, you want to give that child the best conditions in life. You want to put them on a good learning curve in life. You want to give them a platform from which to grow. So there's a lot of potential also in teaching these kids about learning, not to speak about even lifting their capacities. And then you have a growing elderly population. This is a huge healthcare both challenge, but also a challenge on a very personal level, because we're all going to get there, and we all have family who are reaching those stages, becoming vulnerable to neurodegenerative disease like dementia and Alzheimer, which is also on an explosive growth path these days. So a huge need also in this area. And if you look at some of the numbers, there are, according to WHO, 400 million depression cases on a worldwide basis. What can we do to help those people? 60 to 70 of those, only 60 to 70 of those respond to medicinal treatments or therapeutic treatments, and there's a whole group of those who don't even get improvements from that. Can we help those somehow? But the other side is just getting out of the depression condition. One of the side effects of depression is you get a lot of damage to a number of brain functions. These damages usually persist even after you get out of the condition. So what can we do to help them rehabilitate those so they don't relapse back into depression? If you've had depression once, there's a 50% chance of relapsing. If you've had it twice, there's an 80% chance of relapsing. So what can we do to help these people get back to their normal base level in terms of cognition and hinder another relapse? If we look at traumatic brain injury, there are 60 million or 62 million incidents on a worldwide basis. Dementia is doubling every year, and it's expected to reach over 100 million in 2050. So another great challenge that we can help solve with digital technologies. And then there are the overall trends in societies that I talked a little bit about. You have general well-being, you have mobile health, you have mental well-being. There's this constant search for happiness, positive psychology. You have all types of healthcare technologies, apps coming out to measure and track your happiness, to improve your sleep quality, to track how many steps you're doing, etc. So it's really something that we should take seriously and help to go in the right direction. If you zoom into what we call digital brain training, which is a very specific part of neurogaming, you can see that it's on a very, very big growth trajectory. So this is the commercial look actually. This is how big is the market. And it's expected to reach $6 billion in 2020, which is a fairly big amount. And now I'm not even talking e-health, which is a much, much bigger market. And as you can see, there are a number of different groups that we just discussed. You have general consumers, healthy consumers. Then you have healthcare, senior living, that also play a big role. And then you have school systems. And you even have employers who want to do something for their employees. So there are a number of different groups where neurogaming or digital technologies are extremely relevant. It has a very broad application. So how do we navigate this entire space? Then we have the science, and this is where it becomes interesting, because I'm not gonna, you can read some of these statements, but there has been a landslide in terms of the evidence for brain plasticity on the one hand. In my field, the general interest is whether you can actually improve basic brain functions such as your memory function, your working memory function, your attention functions, and all those subsystems that are responsible for having these functions being operational, and whether you can use games and training with games to have benefits that become general to other task activities than the game itself, and actually becoming better, not only at the game, but becoming better in everyday life. And that's what a lot of us in here want to achieve with all the products we're actually doing. So one thing is becoming better at actually doing a specific thing like raising your arm, etc. But if your attention function, if your capacity, or basically the speed with which you can perceive things improves, you will become better at everything. And that's kind of the holy grail of brain training, you can say. There's, for example, been a lot of studies done on first-person shooters that have shown improvements in a whole number of cognitive functions. So this is, of course, extremely interesting. but it's also a huge debate. And a lot of people are saying this is, I mean, we can see evidence, there are specific evidence that this actually works. Computer games can actually go in and change brain functions. And there's also been a lot of rebuttals for this. But let me again ask this question to the audience. Using digital brain training to actually improve basic brain functions, how many of you think this is a science fact? A few. Quite a few, but not as many as the first question. How many of you actually think it's science fiction? That we will not be able to improve basic brain functions?
Your first question was is, the second one is will. You switch from present to future.
Okay, so we
fair
can.
comparison.
Do you think? What do you
Yeah, so if it's now, yeah, then it's a clearer comparison.
Okay, so it's now, right now, with the technologies and tools we have today. You think we can? Is it science fact or is it science fiction? Do you? I would like to.
I would go for fiction.
You would go for fiction. You think with our current level of knowledge we can do it. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the crucial thing for some of us is the actual transfer of it. Because most of the studies that you cited there actually show improvements on a particular sort of lab type task, which is very much like the game or the intervention.
Exactly.
But it's whether that then transfers to all sorts of other situations in the everyday world. You're not so sure.
Exactly. So there's been a lot of studies that have shown specific improvements and much fewer studies that have shown generalized improvements. But I think the one thing that people agree on is that the potential is there. We know that it's possible. We all believe in brain plasticity. The question is more, which specific brain functions can you train in a generalizable way, and how do you do it? And that, I think, is the task of scientists and actually people who produce these types of tools, games. It's our job to help figure that part out. And if you look at the brain training market, some of you might have these apps or have tried it. These are other digital brain training apps. And when I together with Ulrich, who's sitting here, founded Brain Plus 3.5 years ago, we were looking at this market for digital brain training. And I think we saw some of the challenges that still persist today, which is, first of all, there's a lot of evidence out there that's unclear about what actually works and what doesn't. And what a lot of the products were doing was trying to take psychological test paradigms and make games of them, right? So you're taking a test and then you're trying to train something with a test, and that is in itself problematic. Not that it's potentially possible, but it's problematic, and potentially it will not actually improve you. The other part is just, and this is where the real challenge comes into gaming, is the quality of the user experience, the engagement. How fun is it? How entertaining is it actually? And are you able to keep people using these games for long enough for them to actually have an effect? Because one thing that we know from any type of training, whether it relates to learning new skills, brain-wise, or in the terms of the body, you need to have a longer exposure. You need to have training intensity and training volume for there to actually be an effect. And so one of the challenges, I think, and this still persists today with a lot of the brain training stuff out there, is that it basically is too simple in terms of the games for them to be entertaining in the longer term. So how do we actually solve that problem? And I think the problem is definitely solvable, because as we saw, there was a gap in the market, so we set out to fill that gap. And for that, we actually decided to try and work with some really good people out there. So let me tell you a little bit about our story. This was the vision we set. We want to create a global quantum leap in brain performance and health. That's the vision of Brain Plus, my company. The only way we can do that is to try and work with the best people out there for this. And one thing is on the scientific side, and the other way is on the gaming side. How do we get all those groups together? So the founding team, myself and Ulrich, we are of a commercial background. We have also studied cognitive psychology, but we're a mixed bag. Then we have Rasmus Højgaard, who was, all of those of you who have worked with games probably know Crytek, one of the biggest German independent game development companies. He was global director, creative director for those companies, responsible for all their studios, all their game developments. He decided to join our company a year and a half ago. He was also game director at IO Interactive, which is Denmark's most successful gaming company, doing the Hitman series. So we tried to build a team that actually had these expertise, And then we had the scientific part where we actually contacted the University of Copenhagen. And we're lucky enough to get in dialogue with some of the foremost neurorehabilitation experts in Denmark, both in terms of using technology for training the brain and also for rehabilitation. So we worked with these guys since 2012 actually, and they're independent from us. They're not part of the Brain Plus company, they're independent researchers. And also as the chairman of our advisory board, a neurosurgeon from the Danish National Hospital. And with these people and some iOS programmers, we created our first product, which was the one I mentioned in the first story about the woman suffering from PTSD, called the Brain Plus Brain Training app. And this app focused on improving attention, focused on training memory and problem solving. So we had 3 games, and we chose to go with a very gamey look, basically. And maybe it became a little bit even on the childish side, even though it's actually aimed at adults. But it turned out to be very, very popular. And we were selected by Apple and featured in 150 countries as the best new app. We've had over 1 million people download and play this product to date. And so what that told us was that there's a huge interest in this. People are actually really, really interested in doing something for themselves. But we were also unsatisfied with the first product, because even though it was more game-like than any of the products out there today, we still didn't feel we had achieved the full effect of bringing the best things that we know from gaming into something that has a health-related purpose. So what we did was we actually decided to try and get some really, really talented game developers to join the effort. So we managed to partner up with a team called Cape Copenhagen. And this is a Danish independent game development company, and they're some of the best in the industry. All are veterans. They developed some of these titles, a lot of PlayStation titles. All are IO Interactive people. They're basically producing all the games and apps for brands like Lego, Carlsberg, etc. The point here was, we thought that one of the missing links was getting people with real deep gaming competence to come into the field of actually doing something related to neurogaming, something for improving the brain. And with these guys, we've created a new brain training platform called Evolution, which I'm gonna do a little demonstration of. And now we're moving closer to what we had originally envisioned in terms of actually having a real game-like experience while you're doing something to train your brain. Okay. Let's see. And the sound is on. Good. So what we'll do basically is we'll take you on a journey through your own brain.
Maybe it's relevant.
Oh, sorry. Ulrich, you can. No, we can just.
I think it's important to say that this product is not in the market yet. So it's a prototype, and you guys are actually some of the first in the world to see it. And it's a beta version, so it's not. But it looks like it's close to be done. It's still a work in progress. Just so you know.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. So this is actually one of our training exercises, which is called Memory Lane. And your task is to remember these red symbols as you actually navigate this little line. This is a very easy level. I'll be showing you some of the more difficult levels later on. And as you can see, we're using a lot of real game mechanics with visual, auditive cues, leveling up, etc. And obviously, in-game tutorials. But this is actually based on a combination of scientific paradigms that have been proven to actually work. So we haven't tested this game yet because, as Ulrich said, it's a beta. But it's actually based on paradigms that work. One of the paradigms is the actual sequential memory task. Now you saw, instead of just one symbol, there were two. We're increasing the number of symbols every time. So actually holding this in your working memory, you're actually training your working memory, obviously. At the same time, you have a task switching paradigm built into this, because not only are you doing the memory task, you're also doing the navigation task, which right now is extremely easy. So I'm not really spending a lot of my attention on it, but as I'll show you in a little while, this can become extremely challenging as well. So now I didn't spend any attention on it. Good. So that was an example of one of the actual exercises we have. And basically, now your journey in the brain begins, because one of the things that we felt was one of the problems was that you can have all these games and exercises, but they need to be tied into a bigger story. So in evolution, the work of the user is actually to activate your own brain. And each of these, I'm just going to zoom out, each of these little cubes represent one of your neurons. And you can't really see it on the projection. You can see it because the screen is not very good. But there's a lot of background here and depth. And there's a universe behind this. You can unfortunately only see it here on my iPhone because the projector is too not actually accurate enough to show that. So each of these little.
But it shows a brain. It shows brains. Brains when you're on a mission to activate neurons and create connections.
Yeah.
In your brain.
You'll see it a bigger version as we go through. So let's take the next training session on this journey. I'll explain it actually while we do it. This is a game that's called Memorize, and it's actually built on a paradigm developed by the University of Copenhagen, and it's also mixed with a working memory and navigation task. So the job here is to actually memorize where the different objects appear, hold those in your memory while you navigate, and then recall them. And this is, again, it's an extremely simple level, and I'll show you some of the more advanced level later on. There you go. You have to pay, even on the easy levels, you have to pay attention. It's based on a paradigm called TVA. And basically, we're pressuring people on a number of different things. Here you have the actual exposure time. Right now, it's fairly high. You have 4 seconds, I think, to actually memorize the locations of these different objects. Oh, and you have to avoid actually going into hitting the bombs on the way. The other thing we can vary is the number of objects you have to remember, which can be up to 20 objects at a time. We can also vary the type of objects you have to remember. In this case, there are only 2 different objects. There are only 2 different objects to remember. So that makes it fairly easy. We can vary the size of the level, which obviously makes it harder to pinpoint spatially where these different objects are. So basically we have 5 different difficulty parameters that we can vary, so we can pressure on different functions by varying these different difficulty parameters. And as you can see, it's also, it's very gamified. So it's, I have to pay attention. I'm not really impressing you with my memory skill right now, I know, but I'm more concerned with actually telling you what this is all about. Now, one thing is actually using the games for training something specific, but another thing is actually trying to build good behavioral change into people's lives. And that's also one of the things we're trying to do with this product. We want to actually teach people about their brain and teach them good behaviors in terms of actually memory techniques they can use for improving the way they use their brain, the lifestyle habits such as sleep, diet, physical exercise, etc., which are all conducive to a better brain health and a better brain performance. And we have several ways of doing this. One of them is with what we call the brain coach. So we have 6 different brain programs, and each of these have 10 different audio lessons and each of these teaches a brain technique. So let's see if we can get the audio on here. Hang on, I need to be online. Let's go into that. Here we go.
Hi, and welcome to the Brain Coach, an educational audio series created to teach you effective brain techniques that improve the way you use your brain. You can think of the Brain Coach as a sports coach for your mind. The Brain Coach teaches you how to use your brain power in the most optimal way. You'll learn to throw your mental spear farther by using the proper technique. You'll learn to do a mental 100-meter sprint faster by fine-tuning your mental movement patterns. You'll learn to maintain.
So basically, these are short, bite-sized audio lessons. And one thing is whether or not you believe that you can train your brain using games. But techniques for improving your lifestyle have a very, very real-life impact on the functioning of your brain. So that's part of our mission, is also to try and help people achieve those lifestyle changes. Now I'm moving into the next training session. We've activated 2 of the neurons so far. And this game is called Remember Me. In the game, we're actually teaching people techniques, but the game itself is about remembering factual and episodic memory about people that you meet. It's a fairly simple game. A person appears, tells them something about yourself. It can be their name, their habits, their worst fear in life, etc. And you basically have to recall what they told you. And that's why we have the letters. You have to do an actual recall, not a recognition. However, if you fail to be able to recall them, you get the chance to actually see a couple of answers. So let me see. I don't really remember what this guy's name is. So then I'll actually get some choices. So then it becomes a recognition task rather than a recall task, which is significantly easier for the brain to handle. And what we can vary in this game is the number of people we have in play at the same time. You also saw that this one had exposure time, how much time you actually have to remember each of the tasks. We can vary the depth. How many items do you have to remember for each person? So let's say you have one person, you get 8 items to remember in a row. So it also becomes a capacity issue that we can pressure you on. And also increasing complexity of the actual things you have to remember. Is it a name? Is it a number? Is it an abstract concept? So we can vary those types of things as well with this game. So this one is more for training episodic and semantic memory, but also very much for teaching these memory techniques, because we're actually bite-size feeding people things like the method of Loki, if some of you know that, doing visual associations for improving your memory. So that's also one of the purposes of this. So what's, let's see, no, I don't remember her, that's Roberta, that's right. All right, I think we should be good to go on this one. And finally, the last aspect of this that we try to use to teach people some good real-life habits is that we actually give them real-life exercises. And we have over 100 of these exercises in the app. So basically it's a small recipe that you can use, that you can follow and do. It's a small exercise that you can actually do in your daily life for training your brain, for improving your brain function, for improving your lifestyle. So we have these three elements: the actual cognitive training games, the audio lessons, and the real-life exercises. And here comes another aspect of the whole gamification. So every time you finish a little group of neurons, you're awarded with a brain character, a little munchkin, which basically represents the theme of whichever plan that was. In this case, it was introduction, so we're getting. So this is Kickoff Carl. And now we're opening up to a much larger universe. So you've completed the introduction, and now you're ready to start with the Brain Basics program, which focuses on memory, attention, and problem solving. And when we go into the Brain Basics problem, you'll see that now we are entering a more complex part of the brain. I'm sorry it doesn't show it much better here, which you can actually navigate around in, and you'll be guided through this. Let me show you what some of these games look like when you actually push people's limits quite a lot more than you just saw in the beginning. So we could, for example, take something like the memory lane game, where we're speeding up the whole exercise. And you'll see, those of you who actually play games, that this is very much based on the runner platform. So you really have to pay extreme attention for this to work. Task really starts pushing your attention and stealing a lot of your attentional capacity. Similar things we can do with this game, for example, where you can see as we move along and level up, it becomes more and more complex with more and more objects. And let's see here, max capacity, for example. So it can become extremely challenging. Let's try this one. This is almost impossible. You have to have a photographic memory almost to do this. But it just shows you can really pressure people on memory capacity. Here we've increased the exposure time in this particular mode of the game. So for each of these games, we actually have a number of different modes where we challenge different things. And this is memory capacity. This is basically trying to push the capacity in terms of the amount of objects that you have to remember. Another example of a game mode is one where we actually pressure you on your visual perception speed. In this one, you got 200 milliseconds to actually remember where the objects were. So we can actually push your brain in a number of different dimensions with these games. And obviously, and actually this, if any of you are familiar with the TVA paradigm, then this is part of it, basically reducing exposure time very, very dramatically to challenge your visual perception speed. Let's see. I can show you a final one, and then it's enough of the games. Although we love games. This is the one we call precision vision, basically. And on this one, it's about increasing the size of the board. So spatially, you have to pay attention to a much larger area in terms of granularity and remember where the things are. And obviously right now I have 0 chance because this level is extremely hard. So our aim with this is actually to try and make a machine that is pushing your brain's attention functions and memory functions. And so we have each of these different modes of the game. But the other thing you'll notice is that this is an extremely gamified experience. These are like small little casual games. You are progressing, you're getting rewards. We have, right now the statistics is only is slightly developed. There will be a lot more statistics, and this is part of the measurement. We're not using any standardized test for measuring this as yet, but one of the goals in the future is to put in standardized tests that you can also use before and after actually testing. And you can see we want this to be a real game. We want it to be entertaining and use all the gaming psychology possible. So here you have your little collection of neuron characters. Okay, let's switch back to the presentation. So that's kind of the end of the presentation part, and now we'll really get into perspectives on the future of neurogaming, which is related to what we do, but this is also where I want your opinions to come into play. First, let me give you some of my thoughts in terms of the role of games in the future. First of all, I see 2 important but very different uses of digital games in terms of how the user wants to use them. The one are the users. There are a lot of people who play games for fun, for entertainment, for pastime, right? These people will spend time on games no matter what. But one of the roles that we have in the future is to transform even casual games into something that's potentially beneficial. So having added benefits or improvements, and so the hours that people consume on these, specifically, for example, I know this is something that parents are very concerned about, is to make it relevant for their children. They're allowed to use their iPad, they can play for 2 hours, but only if it's a game that actually helps them somehow. That's one of the roles I see for games in the future. The other is games as direct therapeutic tools, and that's why most of you probably are here today at this conference. And their games have a very, very valid role to play as well, because the user plays for the benefits. But the fun actually becomes a bonus. But not only does it become a bonus, it becomes a key means to motivate and to retain and to activate the user to actually stick with the therapeutic exercise or the therapeutic training. In terms of where games have application, this is just an example of, on this axis you see you have healthy people, and then you have people with some injury or deficit. But the whole spectrum is relevant to use games in the entire spectrum. There are those who want to get the most out of their life. There are those who want to avoid mental decline, for example. And then you have recovery or treatment of traumatic brain injury. It could be damages from stress or depression. And then you have some diseases which may be chronic, but where it may be possible to stabilize the symptoms. And then, of course, you have demographic situation, life situation, etc. In my view, all of these potential areas are relevant in terms of the application of games in the future. Then there are 2 other aspects in terms of what is it we're trying to use these games to actually impact. And one part is to use them for actually creating behavioral change, as vehicles of behavioral change. So basically, you give them some new knowledge, which enables them to act in a different way. New knowledge, some people can take it and use it, but other people actually need to be guided. So the other very important one is facilitating these habit changes by giving a structured process of change. That's the product, or the evolution I just showed you is one example of how you can try and do this, by taking people through a structured approach where you give them bite-sized information, you give them exercises, that they have to do with a certain frequency interval. You give them reminders, you give them encouragements, etc. So basically helping them structure the process of change as a helpful tool. And also using all these reward incentive mechanisms, for example, using social gaming to enable people or to engage people and to have their friends come on as well. Then you have the direct functional impact. Can you actually use games to improve specific functions? As we saw, the research basically, 5 minutes left? Okay. The research actually showed that you can for some functions, but others, are they generalizable or not? But this is, but you also have meditations apps, etc., that can help you regulate your nervous system. And in terms of healthcare, maybe there is actually such a thing as a future digital pill. You can use games for diagnostics to see how the brain profile is developing. Is it on a declining curve? Am I going into a relapse? You can use it as an early warning system for Alzheimer's and dementia. These are just possibilities, basically, that I'm outlining here. And you can use it to combat a number of diseases that are related to, for example, the brain. So this is a question for you guys, basically. And I'd just like to raise your hands and let me know what you think. What's the single most important benefit that we can deliver in terms of using neurogaming for our society? Yes?
Better quality of life.
Better quality of life? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. What else? Yes?
Well, I think the value for effort or value for investment is something that needs to be considered. And it is interesting that a lot of anecdotes have been presented, a lot of marketing material here. What I haven't seen presented here is actual quantitative studies that show that these games have an effect and for what populations they have an effect.
Yes.
So that specificity is very much needed.
Absolutely.
And kind of leading on from that, the
Yes.
bit maybe it's my confusion, is kind of who it's for. Looking at the interface, looking at the US-centric language and so on, it looks like it's for an American high school or middle school student. You know, but is that really, who is your user for this that you have in your head when you're thinking about it?
It can be
I know you'll say it can be anybody, you know. But
yes, absolutely.
I think that's a chimera. I don't think anybody can produce something for everybody.
No. I'm not saying that one product will be the product for everybody. That was not the point. The point is that neurogaming for everybody. You need to adjust each product to a specific user population or application.
Yeah.
Very, very much agreed. I'm not saying that our evolution product is for everybody. That was not really the point. The point was that neurogaming in different shapes and forms is for everybody. So what we're aiming at in the beginning is actually adults, but also in the future we'll be aiming at children and youngsters. So it's basically healthy people in the first, who's our focus in the beginning. Healthy people who want to do something good for themselves and who want to improve. That's our.
I think we agree a lot. You need to adapt if you want to have kids motivated for this stuff. You need to adapt it if you want to have it for rehabilitation purposes. You need to do a very thorough testing of the user interaction, the capabilities they have within each of the different issues they have, because they're so diverse, and you have to tailor the user interface and the level of challenge to those needs. We are far from that level with that product.
And I think both of your questions bring me to actually the next question. What's the biggest barrier for positive impact? And one of those is definitely we need more studies. We need studies that actually show it works and what works. Ours is a new product, it's a beta, so there are no studies
But you
on
need
it yet.
studies.
Yes.
You can't start from we need studies that show it works.
No, we have studies that show.
No, what I'm saying is you have to approach these things with an open mind. You know?
Yeah.
I've had politicians come to me and say, do a study that shows this.
Absolutely. Yes, the aim would be to, of course, we have to do studies, and a lot of those studies will show
Obviously,
negative.
you hope that it will.
We hope that it works,
Yeah.
and a lot of them will show negative results, which is the case with a lot of the studies out there today. But some of them will show positive results in some application areas for some user groups. And that's why we need more studies to actually pinpoint where is it effective and how is it effective. So that's one of the greatest barriers. Yes?
Yeah, I think like related, one of the biggest problems with this is there's no regulation, because like I've looked at this a bit, like I'm a medical student so I come more from that side.
Yeah.
Like you guys are, I am parties, but it seems like you are one of the most research oriented ones I've seen, because there's a lot of stuff out in the App Store where it's like, this is like, I think it's good for you, and like, there's no legislation at all to say you have to do any research at all to be like depression cure.
Mm-hmm.
3 months. And like that's a bit scary, because I think even for you guys as like a legitimate like scientific pursuit company, like even that stuff sort of like solves, you know, your market niche, because there'll be a lot of just crap.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes?
If you're going to make medical claims about a product that will fall in the medical devices directive.
Yeah, I think basically one of the problems is there are a lot of claims out there that are unfounded. So it's also finding the balance between actually how do you position this to a user population as a commercial company, and don't make claims that are not true basically, but sell the promise and survive. I have a lot of respect for all the competition out there who are trying to actually make this work, because even though it doesn't, somebody has to take the risk and try to make it into something that people will actually use, right? So this balance between getting it out there, getting the population aware of it, and then getting some real science behind it and back it up.
Can we just take
I
that one?
think, yeah, I think it's a two-way process. The way we approach it, for instance, with the working memory game, I mean, we try to do our best to find the paradigms that are actually meant for training purposes, not for just testing. So we've been through around 8,000 scientific studies to actually find some of the best of them in terms of proven effects. And it looks simple, but it is out of 8,000 studies, it's the stuff that has proven the best effects on working memory. And then also in terms of attention switching within the working memory function, that paradigm is built in there as well, but it's not just something that we figured out and then and said, okay, let's see how that works. It is actually based on that, but from that hypothesis that, okay, this would work as a game, we still need to go out and then test it and prove, okay, these are the effects for this population, this is how it works for these guys as well. And I think that is also what's needed and what we also need to do now.
Yeah.
What we have actually been working with Copenhagen University as well. I think I agree with very much.
Yeah. And one last question we have time for.
I wholeheartedly agree that obviously the end goal for neuro gaming is for the benefits outside of neuro gaming. And personally, back in the day, like 2006, when the brain training craze kicked off, the old like Dr. Kawashima games on Nintendo DS, there's a lot of debate in the field about the end result, whether it has permanent benefits after a certain amount of time, whether it simply improves your concentration within the game. For example, when I played the brain training game for about more than a year, and when I was playing the games, I got better at the games within its own interface.
Yeah.
But it's about the improvements outside. Neuro gaming, the end goal is to improvements outside of that. So
Generalizable effects.
Be stringent in your testing outside of your own product and make sure that you have the
Absolutely.
I mean, what I meant was that you need to test on transfer base.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
the learning curves within the product is not that
The transfer effects are the interesting ones. Okay, let me just as a little small call to action for anybody who's working, interested in this field. If there are any healthcare practitioners here, any scientists who are interested in working with this or working with us on this, please grab me and Ulrich, and we'll be happy to have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim.